Hello, welcome to the show. We are going to dive into today the 6 things, life-changing things that the How to Become Money Workbook showed me that changed my money and my life. And if you guys are watching live, I'm doing new things here. I'm going to start including visuals because I recognize that so many of us are auditory learners, so many of us are visual, and so more of us can learn these things. So guys, this is this week the new program called Money Shift, a 10-week deep dive into the How to Become Money Workbook starts Thursday. You can go to moneyshiftuniverse.com to check it out. On that page, you can also get a free taste of how to become money. So if you guys are watching live with me, tell me where you're watching from, say hi, tell me what you're wearing. Tell me one piece of clothing that you're wearing. Your name, where you're from, and one piece of clothing that you're wearing. If you're listening in the future, hey. So, how to become money. This week is all about it. I am all about it. And I was looking at all the different things that the How to Become Money Workbook changed for me. If you go to moneyshiftuniverse.com, you're going to find a freebie that also has my story, because my story of change with this workbook is immense. I wouldn't be where I am today without it. So I wanted to go into today the 6 things that I didn't know before the workbook, that I learned in doing the workbook, and why I think they're so important. Okay, and they're not what you think. Hi, you guys. All right. The first thing that I learned in doing the workbook is that I was uneducated. I was uneducated about what it really took to create a flow of money. Now, for those of you guys that have spent a lot of your life, like I did, in survival, in hoarding, in poverty mentality, even if you were middle class or whatever, if you grew up with a life that was like, I see you guys, Francis, Cheatham, Bernarda, hi Carrie, that basically was just getting by, epic hand to mouth, you are uneducated. Now, this is kind of a shock to a lot of us, because I know a lot of you, and I know that a lot of us went to school, did the things, a lot of us went to university, a lot of us got multiple degrees. I went a totally other way, but anyway, we like to learn stuff. So to find out that I was uneducated was pretty shocking to me, but I was completely uneducated on what it takes to create a flow of money, because I really thought that if I would think hard enough or try to figure it out or stay stressed long enough, that I would create enough pain for myself that I would then create. And the thing is that I had done that multiple times. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about over social media over this next week, if you guys aren't yet following me on Instagram, please come over there, because that's where I stay really active with like the short chunks of content. One of the things that I'm going to be looking at is like all the things that we think are going to work, right? And part of the problem with our thinking that is that we are really good at pulling rabbits out of hats. Any of you guys really good at creating money at the last minute? Somehow it always works. Most of you that I know aren't homeless, so you've managed to some degree to create, right? That was me. I had managed to quite a large degree, a degree that I hadn't even thought was possible for me to create. So to find out I was uneducated, that's kind of shocking. And look, when you get into the workbook, it's not that the workbook says you're uneducated, but in truth, as I looked through what we learn as we go through this transcript of a class, is that I was taught one way to do it. I was educated in one way, which was hoard it, work hard for it, think about it a lot, stress about it a lot, freak out when you don't have it. That was my education on money, literally. It was unspoken, it was unsaid, it wasn't positioned as education on money, but that's what it was. And what it turns out I needed was something totally other. So that was one of the things that absolutely changed my life, is you've been uneducated. Now, to me, that was a kindness to acknowledge, because it wasn't really, I'm going to say this and not totally mean it, like it wasn't my fault. And when I say that, I mean we aren't exposed at a very young age to the way money really works. What does it really take to create a flow of money? So, thing number one that changed my life, I was uneducated. Thing number two, changed my life. I was unpracticed. Now, this goes hand in hand with being uneducated. It turns out that to have a totally different financial reality, you have to practice things. Now, when we go through the How to Become Money Workbook, which we're going to do at this program, that starts here at moneyshiftuniverse.com, head there, that starts Thursday, we are going to go through for 10 weeks the workbook. We're also going to have a group thing where we can get together and practice this stuff, okay? This changed my life to recognize that it took practice to change my financial reality, and I was unpracticed in the ways of creating a flow of money. I was really practiced. Here's what I was practiced in. I was practiced in start, stop. Anybody recognize that? Create enough money that you get to the next point and then relax and then stop creating money, and then you run out of money and then you freak out and then you create enough money to get to the next point and then you relax and you run out of money. And then, right, I was really practiced in that. I was really practiced in trying to figure out how to get a particular result, which was never the result I got. Any of you guys recognize that? You're like, keep trying to do these things like that don't work. I was really practiced in judging myself for where I had gotten myself so far. And one of the posts I put on social today was like one piece of my How to Become Money story, which was like, I literally came into the workbook and I felt I had this thin veneer of having it together on top of a real pile of shit when it came to money. I had so much backlog and so many things I wasn't handling. And, you know, I was attempting to be this, I was facilitating consciousness. I was a certified facilitator, but honestly, like I would come and talk about money because I needed it, because I needed a different reality. So I felt very, very thinly held together, you know? And what was really true is I had all this backlog and all this stuff I wasn't handling. So that's what I was practicing, was hiding and avoiding, while moving forward the best I could, right? We do that. We move forward the best we can until we get to the point where we kind of have enough self-care or willingness to go, okay, fuck it, we're transforming this shit forever. The fruit's changing forever. So I was unpracticed in creating a flow of money. I was really practiced in judgment and survival, all right? This changed my life, recognizing that I needed to practice something new. And I have to tell you that I did actively every single day practice it. So that's one of the things I want to introduce you guys to in this next 10 weeks is like, okay, so we've done the call, now it's time to practice, okay? Thing number 3, this really did a number on me. Thing number 3, I learned that I was powerful in the opposite way. One of the best conversations in the workbook is, I forget where it comes up because the workbook is 13 questions, right? He's like, you need to go through these questions, get whatever comes up for you with these questions, and we need to clear these, and then we'll go into the conversations. So we do that, we go through the 13 questions. So in one of the questions, one of the things that came up for one of the participants, you might recognize yourself, is that they were really being down on themselves for creating a pile of shit with money. Anybody ever judge yourself for what you've created with money so far? Like I mentioned in the previous point, me too. So he said, I'm aggressively paraphrasing, but he's basically like, so okay, so you created that with money, that just means you're powerful. And if you can powerfully create that, then you can powerfully create something else. I think it took me 3 or 4 times to hear that, to really get it. But once I got it, it's never left me. That's one of the ways I facilitate money now forever. If you can powerfully, if you can create okay, let's look at this for a second. Let me break this down. You as an infinite being with infinite choice and infinite possibilities have created wherever you've gotten yourself to money so far, right? For me, let's take me as an example. I had created, I don't even know, $50,000 in credit card and line of credit debt. I'd created myself behind on taxes in 2 countries at that point, and by the time I handled it, I was behind in 3 countries. I had I had managed in the middle of all of that to continue judging myself relentlessly, and while judging myself, increase my income by a factor of like 3, and travel the world and get certified. So while suppressing and avoiding everything, I was still managing to get greater, sort of. So that took, and so this is the thing, is like, you got to look at, like, if you can create all of that at the same time while making yourself a finite being that doesn't have any other choices, so that takes an immense amount of energy. For an infinite being to make themselves finite and like no choice, it takes an immense amount of energy. If you can create all that, that does not mean you're powerless. It means you're powerful. You're just using your power in the opposite way that would create a greater life for you. So what's greater than creating against you? Creating for you, creating 4 possibilities. We are unpracticed in creating 4 possibilities. So we need to get access to that space. Like, what's the space of creating money? Well, we go into that in the workbook. So this powerful thing is huge, because it isn't that you're powerless and it isn't that you can't. Those are always lies. It's that you're powerful. You're just powerfully creating in the opposite way. The 4th thing that I learned that really changed my entire existence, that I got from the workbook, is that I am the source of everything that shows up in my life. I was it and I am it. I'm the source. And this went hand in hand with powerful. Like, if I am not the source of what shows up in my life, if my life is happening to me, then I can't change it. And this, guys, has been something that I've had to work through my life for years in different ways. So this is something you get kind of as you get it. But there are still 10 years later, moments in my life where I'm still going, oh, this is happening to me. Why is this happening to me? But it's so unconscious. And the thing about money, when you're trying to change everything forever sort of thing, or you're just trying to get enough to pay your bills, wherever it is you are at, is that if you're feeling powerless and like you can't, there's somewhere you're not claiming that you are the source of what's showing up. You're the powerful source of what's showing up in your life right now. And this in the beginning can seem a little like an asshole piece of information, but this is the one that'll set you free. Because if you are the source, again, if you're the source of a pile of shit, you can be the source of something great if you choose. So how do you get access to that choice? If it's just a choice to be the source of a pile of shit or something great, how do you get access to that choice? That's where we go in the workbook. All right, so number 5 thing that I learned that really changed my life is that I was living from limiting beliefs. Now, some of you are going to be like, duh. But okay, if you're living from limiting beliefs, why not live from unlimited beliefs? Like, don't duh me. Go, okay, well, what's showing up in my life? 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 This is a great question to ask yourself. Look around and look at what's showing up. Am I creating what's showing up in my life from an unlimited belief or from a limited belief, right? Now, again, I know this sounds easy, but that's because it is. It's like, and most of these are really supremely unconscious. And this is what I love about a 10-week workbook process, is like, we get to ask you questions that unearth, uncover, uncloak these limiting beliefs, right? Most of the limiting beliefs you function from in life that are creating your financial world are unconscious. They're things that you've made SHEQ. Do you know what SHEQ stands for? They're secret, hidden, covert, invisible, unseen, unsaid, unacknowledged, and undisclosed. But they're running your life. So this was a huge piece for me in this workbook, is like, I'm living from limiting beliefs. I literally believe that my options are limited. I have limited ways of creating money. I'm limited in all these different ways, but all of that was so unconscious. So this was huge. Like, one of the key questions in the workbook is, what is one limiting belief that you function from in your life that's limiting your financial world? So we literally go there. We're like, what are your limiting beliefs? what I think is really powerful now that we've got access to the big four, presumptive reality, need a reactive reality, the big four, is that now we have an even more powerful tool than we did 30 years ago when this workbook came out. Because now we can really look at, what is it you just believe is a fact that's never going to change? Like, we all know that Nancy's terrible with money, right? We all know that. We all know that Bruce has a hard time creating money and he always will. What are the presumptions, right, that you just know are facts that you can't change? We now have a tool to change those things so you don't have to keep living from them. Oof. Fuck yeah. And the sixth thing that I discovered, and this show might be shorter than most, is that I was a great storyteller. I was the best. And here's what I mean. I don't mean this in a great way. I mean, I do tell a good story. But I was also telling myself a lot of why I couldn't. Why I couldn't go to things, why I couldn't choose things. The thing is, when you start telling a story is anything that justifies anything, right? So as soon as you're in the story, you're out of awareness and you're out of choice. You now need to prove that what you're choosing is true and real, and I was a great fucking storyteller. So here were some of my stories that I was telling myself. At that time, I had a lot of friends that were traveling to a lot of different classes. And I was struggling at that time because I hadn't taken myself through the workbook process. I'd bought the thing. It was gathering dust on my nightstand. I had it, but I hadn't done it. So I was still secretly struggling with money. Well, I was surrounded at the time by people who had moved beyond that. They were like living and choosing and creating. So they were traveling to a lot of classes, and so we'd get into all these animated discussions around the kitchen table, you know, and like, are you going to this class? And I would be like, no, I'm not because of blah, 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 blah. No, I would, but I'm not because are all stories. I was a great storyteller. And I didn't discover how good of a storyteller I was until I did the workbook, because one of the things that he's encouraging us to do in the workbook is you got to listen to yourself. Every single time that you go into a but or a because, you're about to tell yourself and tell other people why you can't. So I started to really, 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 really listen to myself. And this really goes back to thing number 2, which is that I was an unpracticed listener of myself. I was unpracticed. I didn't see the value in listening to I didn't know that listening to myself was important. I didn't know that I had to listen to myself in order to catch myself in a limiting belief, right? These all weave together, right? I had to practice listening to myself so that I didn't continue living from limiting beliefs. And Crystal Crawford energy, I believe, plus this book is life-changing. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This course is not going to do anything, I promise. So again, I was unpracticed, right? So I'm uneducated, unpracticed, living from limiting beliefs. So I had to really practice listening to myself. That was one of the first things, and I really actively remember this. One of the first things I had to practice was listening to myself. So in the book, we are given all these tools. And if you guys go to moneyShiftUniverse.com and you click on the free taste, you can opt in and you're going to get a 15-minute conversation I did and my own story and the chance to share this with 2 of your friends and get access to my Money Shift Daily Success Workbook. And in that, I share with you how my perspective on using the How to Become Money tools. Now, I would need more than that. I would need a class too, but it's there for you, okay? My gift. One of the biggest life-changing things was to go to the end of the workbook, write down all the tools, which I've done for you there, and really start to look at how do I use these in my life? Because it's one thing to write down the tools, cognitively know the tools, have gone through the class and experienced this big, feel-good, energetic transformation, and then wake up as myself the next morning with my thoughts running about money. So I recognized right away that, like, unless I basically lived in How to Become Money Workbook land, which eventually you do start to become that, I was going to have to get more assertive about where my thoughts went. Because what I remembered about the workbook was like, money shows up from your thoughts. And my thoughts, very first thoughts in the morning about money were, I would think about my bank account, I would picture the numbers in it, and I would feel panicked that there wasn't enough. Every morning. And that's where I tried to create money from. One of the things I learned in the workbook, you can't create a flow of money from that. Remember how I said we were uneducated? I didn't know that. I didn't know I couldn't create a flow of money from that. I literally thought that if I don't know what I thought. I was so unconscious about what I needed to be with me in order to transform my being, where I was functioning from. I was so unconscious about that. So as I got educated, because remember I started out uneducated about that, and I realized I'm gonna have to practice this. I'm gonna have to practice being an unlimited, powerful being, because up to this point I have been limited and disempowered. The very first thing that I had to expose myself to was listening to me, listening to where my thoughts went, listening to where my feelings went. Because thoughts and feelings are lower harmonics. They're symptoms of reaction. They're not being, they're not choosing, they're not, and that's from there you create a flow of money. From those other things you can't. You literally can't. So it doesn't matter why they're there, or what your story is about it. Remember how I was a great storyteller? Doesn't matter what your story is. The result is the same. There you are, sitting in lack, scarcity, unhappiness, all this other stuff, right? Doesn't matter what your story is. You can be the best storyteller on the planet, but there you are, not creating flow of money, freaking out instead, or worried instead, or depressed instead, dying instead, right? You can't create a flow of money from there. Did anybody ever tell you that? Did anybody ever introduce you to the practice of being money? Exactly. So what's required is something different. We require a pivot. We require a pivot from trying to figure out what's wrong with us, that we can't do this, because there isn't anything wrong with us. Remember this point here? There's nothing wrong with you. You're just what? Is there something wrong with you, or is something else true? You're powerful. Now you might be powerfully creating shit right now. And the thing is, like, as humanoids, we're incredibly extreme. So basically if we're gonna do something, we're gonna do it times a godzillion. You're incredibly extreme, you're powerful. So if you're gonna create shit, you're gonna create extreme shit. Thank you very much. I'm not just gonna create like mediocre shit. I'm gonna create the biggest shit I can possibly create, and I did. So that it takes me years to clean up and catch up from. You're welcome. You're not powerless, you're powerful. But you might be powerfully doing powerlessness. You might be powerfully doing hoarding. You might be powerfully doing poverty. You might be powerfully doing something else. What do you want to be the source of, right? Thing number 4, you're the source. So are you going to be powerfully the source of lack, or are you going to be powerfully the source of being money? And what's required to do that? Practice. Education and practice. So I want to warmly invite you to this 10-week adventure. It will be life-changing, so don't choose it if you don't want that. But I have a 1-pay and a 3-pay. And on the 1-pay you can get country pricing, and on the 3-pay you pay 100% pricing, and you are invited. If you just, at this point, want a taste of it, still go to moneyshiftuniverse.com and click the taste. And then you can share it with your friends to get your success workbook. You can buy the How to Become Money Workbook on your own and do a self-study course if that's what you choose. What will create for you? You are the source. You are powerful. Now, what do you want to choose to be powerful about and with? Share this with a friend who needs it. I adore you guys. I'll see you in the program, or I'll see you next week.